So you got a Jeep YJ. There's things you love, things you hate. Let's talk about it today. Let's go. Now, being that I'm the type of person that likes to end my conversations and my videos on a positive note, I want to start out with my dislikes toward the YJ. Then we'll pick up on our loves at the end of it. Notice I said dislikes. Hate's such a strong word. Why do that? So let's get started. The first thing I totally dislike about YJs, of which I've talked about in my past videos, and I've even done a video on how to remove them. Catching on yet? Yeah, those track bars, they gotta go. Simply because they hurt your articulation. When you're on the trails and you're trying to get that axle flex and stuff, that track bar is gonna stop you every single time. It's gonna limit how far that axle drops. And I mean, it's like, here's the track bar and here's your springs, It does this little arc thing like this. These springs were not designed to travel at an arc. They were designed to go up and down. The shackles on the front of your Jeep were designed to come in and out like this right here, and not sway back and forth. Track bars bind your suspension. So track bars, they gotta go. Now, I don't hate them per se, but I strongly dislike them because they ruin articulation and they hurt the ride. They just make the Jeep ride so rough, so they gotta go. Now, the next thing I strongly dislike about the YJs, as I've mentioned in my past videos as well, is I've already went through 2 of them. I got rid of those and finally swapped in an 8.8. Got a clue? That Dana 35, dude, it's gotta go. It's weak, inherent issues, I mean, there's just so many things about it that it just says you can't really wheel hard on them. I know there's gonna be some people out there that's gonna argue with me about that. Now, I've got 37s on my 35s and it's done just fine. Well, great, dude, you've had a lot of luck on your side. You better go buy a lottery ticket. I didn't even beat on my rig that hard. 2 Dana 35s. Gotta go. When I swapped my 8.8 in, I have done ALP on black level trails, running on 35-inch tires, limited slip rear, locked front. I haven't had a seconds issue out of it. So the Dana 35, don't hate it, because if you've got a stock rig and you're just driving around on the streets, basically a pavement princess, Dana 35 is gonna be just fine. But as soon as you start hitting any kind of trails, you're gonna find its weak link pretty quick. So Dana 35, you gotta go. And since we're on the topic of differentials, the next thing I do not like at all, what were they thinking when they put straps on your yokes to hold U-joints in? Thin metal straps that under a lot of pressure. Now, Ford got it right. They used U-bolts to hold the U-joints to the yoke of your differentials and stuff. Chevrolet, Chrysler, and, well, Jeep, Chrysler, Jeep, AMC, whatever. And I say Chrysler because I used to have an old 74 Dodge Charger that had the straps holding the U-joints in. Built 440, 727 Torfly with a strong shift kit in it, with meat on the ground that wide. A little bitty tiny straps holding that U-joint in. Yes, I snapped a few U-joints out of that thing. So what Chrysler, what Chevrolet, and AMC Jeep was thinking by using those little straps, I don't know. They just wasn't thinking. They wasn't thinking that, there's gonna be somebody out there with a heavy right foot that might break this stuff. So get rid of those straps by putting in a Ford U-bolt system. Only thing you need is a 5/16 drill bit. Drill through the yoke, run those U-bolts through, put nuts on the back side with some blue Loctite, and you're good to go. Now, you can convert the Dana 35 rear. The Dana 30 front, not quite as easy, simply because where the nuts would set for the U-bolts, it's kind of at an angle, so the nut wouldn't set correctly if you tried that. But you can buy the aftermarket yoke, because this one has it. When I built this Dana 30 front and put the gears, lockers, and stuff like that in, I made sure I got the correct yoke that I could put U-bolts in instead of doing the flat straps. So, what were y'all thinking, AMC, Jeep, Chrysler, whatever, about those straps? I don't know, but hey, they gotta go. Now, for this next item I dislike, let's just say that I understand why Chrysler tried to do this, or AMC, Jeep, whatever. I understand what their frame of mind was. You've got this rig, look. Flat. Windshield, flat. Aerodynamics, none. They were trying to make the Jeep more fuel efficient by using a central axle disconnect, or otherwise known as a CAD. That front axle on that side right there has this lump right in the middle of the axle that one-piece axle, two-piece axle, comes together, busts together with splines. It's got this collar that slides back across it that joins the two axle shafts together. It's got a vacuum motor that moves that collar back and forth that engages the two-piece axle. The vacuum lines get rotten, the vacuum switch gets rotten, the vacuum diaphragm gets holes in it and gets rotten. Things stop working. So what do? You take that central axle disconnect and you do a Posi-Lock conversion, do a one-piece axle conversion, or as I've caught a lot of heat for, take a hose clamp, wrap around that axle, hold that collar in place, and let it rip. Right now, this Jeep has that hose clamp holding that collar in place right now. I had a Posi-Lock conversion, as you guys see in the past video. The handle, the pull-out handle on it broke. When it broke, my front axle won't connect. So I took it back to the house, took that cover off, put a hose clamp around the axle shaft to hold the collar in place. And I went to Adventure Off-Road Park, wheeled the heck out of it on some black level trails. It held up just fine. So all you naysayers out there says, oh my gosh, you're gonna use a hose clamp on an axle? That can't work, that will not work. Yes, it does too, because right there is proof. In the topics I talk about here, if I've got a video to it, I'm gonna link it up down below. And that's one of the things I have a video on, as whenever I put that hose clamp around that axle to hold the collar in place. Look at the release date on that video. You will find that it's been several years ago, and I've ran that hose clamp on that axle for that many years, wheeled the snot out of it. I'm not easy, so I don't mind bouncing that rev limiter, okay? I've had those front axles spin, I've had the rear one spin, just throwing dirt, all kinds of stuff. That clamp has held up just fine, so it's not that big a deal. And that clamp has held up just fine. So the next thing that I strongly dislike about YJs, who ever thought of Torx screws? Really? Really? Those things are an abomination to automotive kind. They're a pain. Why? And see, now with the CAD, I understand what they were trying to do. They're trying to save fuel, make it more fuel efficient, meet this standard, meet that standard, whatever. The Torx makes no sense. None. Zero. There's so many different options they could have went with. But hey, it is what it is. So with the Torx screws, as I do mods and as I change stuff, they go. I am not putting them back in. So Torx, gotta go. Now originally I was just gonna do 5 of each. 5 I dislike, 5 I love. But on the way up here, I realized there was one more thing that I missed. And that's those doggone sun visors. I mean, dude, really? I mean, yes, mine's modded because I've got this accessory bar up here, so I've dropped it down lower. But in the factory position, they're useless. They're useless. So this accessory bar, I put these clamps here, which has quarter 20 threads in, which allowed me to move my visor down some, making it a little bit more useful. But I've also got a phone mount there, and some of my videos, you know, if I'm doing driving, talking head stuff, I mount a camera right there. So that accessory bar is pretty cool. I'll drop a link down below for the video where I did that. Really handy. But most of all, it helped with that issue of the sun visor. Now I still got this gap right here, so I can, if it's coming through like right through, speaking of sun, if it's coming through right through this area right here, I'll just kind of leave it about right along there, which helps block out coming through that gap. But as it, you know, progresses downward or whatever, then I can just keep lowering this to block it on out. So we're going to end that list with the sun visors of what we dislike or hate, as the title is going to be called in YouTube. Let me tell you something, how YouTube works. It's called search algorithm. The stronger you put your titles showing emotion, the better you rank. And it's the same with web pages. I mean, I run a web page about tourists of Nashville as well. Say for instance, www.fixjeeps.com, Jeep modifications or something. And by the way, that is a real website because that's my website. www.fixjeeps.com is my site, so go check it out. Some of the videos I do land on that web page right there or website, and to give you more explained information. But the whole thing with, you know, I'm saying dislike and the title's going to say hate is because with search algorithms, the stronger the emotion of the title in a search function, the better and faster it ranks. So, you know, I'll put in the title things I love and hate about Jeep YJs. Man, hate's such a strong word. There's too much of that in the world now. Why add to it, okay, you know? So now that we got the dislike list out of the way, let's continue with what we love about YJs. And we'll say love, because love's a positive thing. Now, what do I love about the YJ? Well, let's start out with how unique they are. Now, one of the things that makes a YJ, we got the square headlights. That is one of the iconic features of the YJ. It's also one of the most, least liked things about the YJ, depending on who you ask, because it became an abomination when AMC released the YJ with square headlights. Because everybody knows the Jeeps have round headlights, right? I mean, just look at that. That's just sexy. Really? I know, except for the part where I've got my fender installed over here and factory fender over here. It looks a little bit warped and I need to put the other one on someday. I'll make a video when I do it, yes. What's the next cool feature about a YJ? Yeah, one of the things that people fuss about the most, and as you can tell, my Jeep is wet. I had to use those on the way home. Yeah, those wiper blades all up in your face, that's one of the things that people really do not like about YJs. Especially the passenger, they really got it up in your grill, because you see from the driver's point of view, where there's the headrest, you're pretty well open, you're good. Now for the passenger's point of view, yeah, they got that wiper arm all up in your face. Now they do make kits to where you can take the wiper arm and make it lay all the way down. But you know what, it doesn't bother me. And anyone who rides in my YJ that wants to fuss about my windshield wipers, you don't have to ride in it. I love my YJ. Weird windshield wipers and all. The last generation of Jeep to have a metal dash is the Jeep Wrangler YJ. As you can tell right here where the speakers are located, metal, baby. Now, of course, we do have the plastic overlays right here. Back in behind all that, it's one solid piece of metal all the way across. Yeah, somebody's gonna pop in there and say, well, look, you got plastic right there. Yeah, but we don't have nowhere near as much plastic as the TJ does. Not to mention, the plastic in the YJ hold together much better than the TJs, JKs, and stuff like that, because it's very common to see the TJs and up with busted vents and dry rotted this, and hey, mine are a little discolored, but still holding in good. Now, the only real thing that on the YJs that has a problem is the glove box. It's a plastic glove box from the factory. They do tend to break, especially like where the hinge is right along in here. If you open your glove box and something falls between the hinge and the bottom tray part and you close it, it'll snap that hinge every time. Hence the reason I've got an aftermarket glove box. But it's got an old crap handle right there for whoever's wheeling and we're getting silly. Yeah, they can hold on right there. Plus you got a lock right here on this. Let's go on the other side, look at it closer. Now, as I mentioned, we got a lock right here. So if you got any kind of important documents or anything you want to lock up in there, you have that ability. And here's the old crap handle. You hold on good and tight while you're out wheeling. Like I said, this hinge right here on the factory one, this drops down. And if you're a pencil or whatever falls in between the body and that door and you close it up, it breaks some hinges every single time. And that's what happened to mine originally. So I elected I'd rather have this right here anyway, so that's what I replaced it with. And I got my cup holders too. I like them. And as you see right here, I've got my drink holders. You know, we got some water going on here, but if you got your soda drinks from the restaurant, whatever, it fits in it pretty decent too. As long as the cups isn't too big, it does pretty well. These things right here actually belong on a bicycle. They bolt to the lower part of the frame. But I took some scrap metal I had laying around here, made these little brackets, and well, they work out actually really, really well. Now, if you got a particular drink you drink a lot, like I say, for instance, a Monster drink or something like that, the cans fit in there and they move around a little bit, but you can take and bend this right here back and forth a little bit to tighten it up onto whatever type of drink you use. Most of the time, not this water here, but other waters that I drink, the bottle is a little bit bigger diameter, so this is actually custom fit to the waters that I normally drink. Pretty cool mod there. Link down below, check it out. Now you check out the YJ's dash, it's so simplistic. Gauges on the line here, gauges all lined up there. Of course, I've done the white face conversion, and plus, let me turn on my lights here. Ooh, look at that, I got red lights. Those are just so cool. And complete with mud from a last wheeling event. As I mentioned elsewhere in the video, the gauges do tend to have a little issue every now and then. There is a ribbon back in behind there that's got a copper tracing on it, I guess you might say. That stuff gets all tarnished up and it starts making bad contacts with the plug. But they're super easy to take these apart, to clean that ribbon back there and clean out the contacts for the bulbs. And I mean, they're just, again, it's a simplicity thing. They just rock really good. Now with your speedometer attack, they don't come apart quite as easy for adding the white gauge face conversion or the LEDs. It's a little bit of work to get two things apart, but I will drop a link down below for you guys to check out how I did that conversion. Now the custom paint job here that you see has got the little brown spots, that's actually pretty easy. Find you a mud hole, have it 4-wheel drive or 2-wheel drive. If you spin it hard enough and kick it, it'll sling mud all inside your Jeep. Makes for a cool look. Okay, I'm gonna have to cheat and pull out the light. Right here in this location for the factory YJs, you normally got a driving light switch, a rear window defrog switch, and a rear window wiper switch. Not in any particular order, I'm just saying that's what's normally right here. If you look in your YJ and you have factory switches here, it's gonna be something along the lines of that, especially you hardtop crew. Now, for those of us who had a factory soft top rig, you normally not gonna have any switches in here whatsoever. As a matter of fact, it's gonna be a blank plate right here. But the holes is behind that plastic film right there. Those holes are a perfect fit for this style switches. So obviously you can tell this wasn't shot on the same day that all the rest of it was, because I'm not in the woods, I'm in my driveway right now. I was doing the editing of this video, discovered, wait a minute, all that footage I shot for the interior, you know, demonstrating about the dash, the headlights and stuff, none of it was there. It was all gone. I know I shot it, I knew I said all this stuff because I've got my mic on right now. I had the audio track, but I didn't have the video track. Because guess what? I'm reshooting this part. But then I get off work. It looks cloudy all day. But as soon as I get off work, it rains. So I get out here, shoot the video, discover my camera doesn't have the SD card in it. This video's been fun to shoot. So, on with the rest of the video. Let's go. The next thing I love about the YJs, and this is so legit, I do love this about the YJs, is their simplicity. From 1991 and newer YJs, their fuel injection system is the most simplistic system I have ever seen of any vehicle I've ever worked on. And I've worked on a lot of cars, people. Their sensors are easy to get to. They're not expensive. They're easy to diagnose. They're just a perfect setup for a new person coming onto the scene of working on fuel injection. There's only two sensors that'll leave you stranded. Your crankshaft position sensor and your camshaft position sensor will leave you stranded. The rest of them, you'll limp home, it'll run like crap or whatever. So those two sensors, crankshaft and camshaft position sensor, keep those extra in your rig all the time. And they're simple enough that you can actually change them on the side of the road if you have to. Now, a while back I did a video showing where each sensor is located and what their sensor functions are. I'll link it up down below. And as you see from the last thing that I said I loved is their dash. It's such a simple layout. Just a row of gauges here, speedometer tack. I mean, it's just such a simplistic layout and it just works. Now, true statement that some of you say, now they're problematic, and they can be, but here's the deal. Oftentimes these old rigs are being run with their tops off, they get rained in, get mud slung in them. That crap gets behind the dash and those contacts start getting dirty. That's when they start giving you problems. And it's a really easy fix to pull all that stuff apart, clean them up. Again, that simplistic thing, it's just a flat ribbon back there. You can clean the contacts on that flat ribbon and the plug that plugs into that flat ribbon. You can clean all those contacts, and more times than not, everything starts working again. The bulbs, the contacts that goes to the gauges, you can take that whole thing out, super simple, clean them all, and more times than not, it fixes the issues you have with your gauges. Again, simplicity, one of the prime great things about a YJ. Now, as you go into the other Jeeps, your TJs, JKs, and stuff like that, the fuel injection system, the ignition system, it just gets so much more complicated. The TJs still are not too awfully bad because they've got a crankshaft position sensor that sits down inside the block. They don't have a distributor like a YJ does, but they got that coil pack that goes along the side of the head, and they are more complicated than the YJs, but they're not too far out of reach of being, I wouldn't go as far as saying totally simplistic because they are OBD too, but they're not too bad. But the YJs, you can't make it no more simple. They're super simple. I mean, like, wow simple. Got the point? I like YJ's fuel injection system. Yes. And the next thing I love about YJs is they're pretty much the least expensive of all of them. I can see I'm kind of a gray area on that spot, simply because the YJs are such a unique model of all the Jeeps. That tends to drive their prices up. So it really depends on what the rig is built like, how close to stock it is, or which rig it is. Like, and if you've got the Renegade Edition, I know some of you got to freak out on that one because that Renegade Edition to me is just, no, it's just ugly. But me I can be a purist when it comes to vehicles. That wide body, that fiberglass body, and those funky headlights in the fender thing. Ooh, gross. I'm not a fan of them, but if I was to come across one for the right price and I bought it super cheap, I'd fix it up and sell it to somebody who loves what the Renegade is. I wouldn't butcher it. That's just wrong. But I would sell it to somebody who would love the Renegade and treat it for the nice rigs that they are. Which brings up another thing about the simplistic thing that I love. The body kits on those Renegades are made out of fiberglass. Dude, I can do some fiberglass. I'm really good at that stuff. And so to fix a cracked fender or even cracked hard tops, they're not hard. Fiberglass is pretty easy to work with once you get used to it. So again, it's a simplistic thing. Hard tops busted, so what? Fiberglass, fix it, you're good. Now, the next thing I love about YJs are probably the least expensive of all the Jeep models to buy. That really depends, honestly, because there's certain models of the YJs, like for instance the Renegade. The Renegade is, some of you don't know, it's got that wide body kit on it. They're kind of like the street-driven version, the beach rig, you know? It's got that wide body fiberglass kit on it. They're just, to me, they're like, ooh, the yuck. They just ugly. They ugly. And being that I like to get out and wheel, have a good time, out in the woods and stuff, that fiberglass body kit's not going to survive if I was to have a Renegade. But here's the deal. If I was to come across a Renegade, and for the right price, and I bought it, I wouldn't butcher it. I couldn't do that because I know that Renegade is worth some change, okay? So I would get it in a good running condition, fix the body kit if it's got any bust, because I mean, I'm pretty skilled with fiberglass. I'd fix that body kit, get it running good, make it dependable, and I would hold that rig until I found somebody who loved the Renegade for what the Renegade is, and I would sell them the Renegade and go on with there. But other than the Renegades, I mean, you got your Sahara editions, a few other things, but what we don't have is the Rubicons. Rubicons didn't start to the TJs. And with the TJ Rubicons, of course, come the Dana 44 axles, the lockers, and all that kind of stuff. The YJs did come out with that, so therefore that helps drive the cost down on the YJs, which means you can pick a YJ for a few $1,000s and build it like you want to, because they're super simple to build. Again, simplicity thing. Change out axles under a YJ. I mean, you got two U-bolts here, your shocks, your steering geometry and all that kind of stuff. Super simple to swap out. TJs, if you lift them too much, then you got control arm issues. If you lift them too much, you need the long arm conversions. I mean, once you start getting into coil springs and stuff, then it just gets so much more complicated and so much more expensive. YJs are simplistic and cheap to build. I mean, back in the day when I first got this rig right here, I paid $1,050 for it. And I say $1,050, I know that sounds like a weird number, but my dad bought two Jeeps at the same time. He bought a 2006 TJ Sport, and then he bought this. He paid $4,500 for both of them. $4,500 for both of them. The TJ, I wouldn't be afraid to go to California in that thing. It runs perfect, okay? It is the 4.0 with the 6-speed in it. So like I said, it's 2006. It's got the 6-speed in it. This is the 4.0 5-speed. Now granted, this thing was an absolute basket case when I got it, but again, simplicity, cheap. I put the thing back together and it was super easy. So I love that about the YJs, that they're just easy to build, they're not expensive, parts are super cheap, a lot of compatibility. This thing's got a forward rear end and a Ford 8.8, so super easy to swap. If you got a little bit of fabrication skills, you can upgrade that Dana 35, put a Ford 8.8, and just go. The Ford 8.8 holds up pretty good. So I had this thing, a Venture Off-Road part not long ago, and I was running the black level trails. Hey, it took the beat and kept on going, no problems. If it was a Dana 35, not so much, but I think we covered that in those things I do not like. So it mentioned about swapping axles because they got leaf springs. Leaf springs, I love leaf springs. They're so easy. Again, simplicity, cheap. The leaf springs, you can pull leaf springs out of an XJ to stretch the back of these things. Even buying new leaf springs, I mean, they're not expensive. So leaf springs are super simple. They're tough. They take a beating. You don't run into weird suspension geometry issues with leaf springs like you do coil springs. Coil springs, too much lift, you gotta go long arm and all this kind of stuff. With these, if you go too much lift on these, you gotta worry about your drive shaft. Doing a slip yoke eliminator, spline drive shaft, Or if you go spring over axle, then you got a whole other animals you got to deal with up front. But if you was to do all that stuff to like a TJ or newer, dude, so much more money, so much more headache. Leaf springs rock. Leaf springs rock. And since I mentioned leaf springs and how simple they are, down below I'll drop in a link about when I did the Junkyard lift on this thing. I lifted this thing for like $150, $170 or something like that. And yeah, Junkyard lift out of an S10, super cheap, not hard. So I'll link them up down below for you to check out those. Now the fifth thing I love about YJs, and I've kind of touched on this on other things I've already talked about, is their parts are cheap. They're compatible with XJs. Your Jeep Cherokee XJs, a lot of the parts off of them will swap over onto these. I realize that these are very hard to find in the junkyard, and rightfully so, because why trash a Wrangler when you can build them into a rock crawler, and you know, there's all kinds of things you can do to them. XJs make excellent rock crawlers, just along with the Wranglers and YJs and stuff. But more times than not, there's people who take the XJs and they're just a daily driver, getting back and forth to work, and the XJ dies, they go to the junkyard because there's billions of those things were made. I don't know, millions, or I know what billions, whatever. Between YJs and XJs, the YJs, Wranglers, people keep rebuilding them. Oh, we blew up a motor, put another one in it. Blew up the axles, put bigger, better ones in it. YJs, people keep rebuilding them because they're worth more. They're just a prime Jeep for beginners to get hold of and enjoy a Jeep, okay? They really are. But the XJs, and the only reason I'm still mentioning this is because of the compatibility of parts. The XJs were most people's, grocery getters. So there are some people like me that if I was to have an XJ and something happened to it, I would turn it into a beater rock crawler and have a good time out in places like this right here. But most people who are just a grocery getter XJ, oh my gosh, the motor died, take it to the junkyard. Oh, rear end went out, oh, take it to the junkyard. So when you go junkyard hopping, you can get sensors off of them that work on the YJs, brake components that works on the YJs. There's so many parts off of an XJ that'll work on a YJ, and that makes life so much more simple. Again, simplicity. And since we're on the topic of parts, the aftermarket support for the YJs is really, really good. So if you want to get into Jeeps, find you a YJ. They're cheap, they're super simple to build, they're simple to upgrade, they're cheap to work on, they're not hard to work on. There's just so much positive about these old rigs right here. Yes, there are some negatives that I told you about at the beginning of the video. Those negatives are easy to take care of. They really are. This is the beginner's level Jeep to go out, buy it, hit the road, top down. I would say wind blow through your hair, but if you're like me, it ain't gonna happen. But they're the perfect rig to just get out and have a good time, and learn how to work on vehicles. They really are. So in this video, we talked about what I disliked about YJs, and I told you what I loved about YJs, and I told you I'd end this on a positive note. Oh my gosh, I just thought of something. I said and told you in the beginning, there's nothing I really hate. I was wrong. I hate marshmallow. I cannot stand marshmallows. You know those peeps? You know those little peeps, those little things you get at Easter time? Those things are an abomination of food kind. I hate those peeps. But I love my Jeep. Told you I'd end it on a positive note. Peace. Later, y'all.